And contrary to much media reporting and some sort of rather misleading political statements, we really had some considerable success, sometimes in the courtroom, but sometimes in the classroom or the police station or on the street or all the places where human rights have to live, sometimes even in the Parliament area. Article 2 has been incredibly important in, for example, protecting victims of deaths in custody, but also the victims of crime, where they've been ill-served by the police, or by the probation service, or by the state. There's a particularly horrible case of a young woman called Naomi Bryant, who was murdered by a man called Anthony Rice, who should probably never have been let out of prison on licence. I say he should probably never have been let out, but the real point is that when he was let out on licence, the parole board was not shown the full extent of his previous convictions, and in particular the risk that he posed to vulnerable women. And shortly after being released, after a complete cacophony of negligence and mishap on the part of the authorities, he murdered a vulnerable woman. And in a very, very instructive and not untypical, I'm afraid, exercise in arse covering, that's a technical legal term that we use a lot. Exercise in arse covering saw a report commissioned by the government into what had gone wrong, and the Chief Inspector of Probation of the time blaming human rights lawyers and the Human Rights Act, because the outrage, you understand, was not that the authorities didn't look at the man's previous conviction, but that the outrage was that he had access to legal advice and that people made human rights arguments for why he might be released. So it's not the negligence of the authorities, it's the audacity of human rights lawyers, who really shouldn't be representing clients at all, I suppose. I just leave them to rot unrepresented in prison. And so the Chief Inspector of Probation blamed the Human Rights Act. It wasn't negligence, it wasn't maladministration, it was the Human Rights Act. And this is back under the last government now. This led to calls for the repeal of the Human Rights Act. The last government commissioned reports and investigations and so on, which of course in the end completely exonerated the Act and showed how appalling the administration of this case had been inside the various authorities. And what's more, we were able to represent the dead woman's mother and to challenge the coroner's original ruling that there would be no inquest because the cause of death was so straightforward. Unlawful killing by this released prisoner. End of story. We were able to secure, by way of Article 2, an inquest and a full narrative verdict that of course pointed the finger at prison service, probation service, police, and so on. It's quite inconvenient to the authorities, this human rights stuff on occasion, let alone to a narrative that says that human rights are only for the bad guys and never for the victims of crime. Article 3, prohibition on inhuman integrated treatment and torture. This is fascinating and bizarre because, of course, we were told in my youth that we didn't need a Bill of Rights in Britain because things like torture and slavery don't happen in places like Britain. And yet, in my adult lifetime, the last 10 years that I've spent at Liberty, we've seen the extraordinary things, have we not? We've seen wonderful euphemisms and abuses of the language, like extraordinary rendition. Sounds like I'm about to sing to you. Let me give you an extraordinary rendition. Kidnapping, torture. Waterboarding. Sounds like a seaside sport, yet it's drowning. But anyway, Article 3 has been successfully used since the Human Rights Act to defeat policies of forced and deliberate destitution of asylum seekers and to block government attempts to admit secret evidence obtained by torture in legal proceedings. Shocking that it had to happen, but important that the Act was there to do its job. Article 4, slavery. Surely I've got nothing to tell you about slavery. Surely nothing. Surely It's redundant protection in modern day Britain, right? No. And did you know that until we brought litigation against various police forces who were not taking action against people who were keeping modern day slaves in their homes, there was no criminal offence in England and Wales upholding some